You know, all I ever really do is complain, so let's do some more of that. Mystery Dungeon. Now this one's funny. You kill a bunch of Beedrills with a Pikachu, but you don't use a Pikachu, you are a Pikachu. Alright, it's story time out there for all you youngins and all you oldens watching this. When the DS, the original model DS, first came out, I don't remember the exact timetable, but Pokemon was said to be coming along with it. Pokemon Generation 4. Might I add. It was announced the same year it came out in 2004, if I remember correctly. But we didn't get Diamond and Pearl until all the way in 2007. By that time, this wasn't even the right model DS. You had to have a DS Lite or you were nobody. And in the interim, in those long 3 years, those 3 kid years if you were me, waiting for the new Pokemon game to come out, it seemed like they were torturing us with all of these Pokemon spin-off releases that just gave you enough of a taste of the franchise to make you want the real thing. We had Pokemon Ranger, which was probably one of the cooler ones. We had Pokemon Tauros, Pokemon Dash. But there was one that was actually pretty interesting, and that's Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Blue Rescue Team. There was also Red Rescue Team, which is what I played for this on the Game Boy Advance. They are the exact same game, so it doesn't really matter. It was never any kid's wish to be a Pokemon, but sort of like the, you don't invent the better horse, you invent the car. It's giving you something that you don't know you wanted, but it seemed cool anyway. Nintendo Power even ran a 6-part manga series advertising Mystery Dungeon, and I think to this day it may be the only manga I have ever read in my entire life. So I was browsing Nintendo Switch Online Game Boy Advance. It had been a while, so I got the "there's something new to play" message, and it's Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Remarkable, and I'm surprised. I'm shocked that this would be here, because there exists a full-scale remake of this game on the Switch, so that must be deader than dead, because they don't care about cannibalizing their own market with this. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon was a big childhood game for me, so I figured, what the hey, I guess it's due for a replay. And Pokemon Mystery Dungeon holds the frick up. What else would we expect though? It was made by Chunsoft, the NES and SNES era Dragon Quest company. I have reviewed Torneco's Mystery Dungeon in the past. It was okay, but it's no Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. I believe Pokemon is the best skin this series has ever had, because they really do work well together. Game starts with a personality quiz straight out of Dragon Quest III Super Nintendo Remake, which determines your avatar Pokemon. Both as a kid and present day, I got Mudkip, but I didn't really want to play the same character, so I retook the quiz. This time, with the help of my handy-dandy strategy guide, I managed to rig it so I got Pikachu instead. I almost have as fond memories reading this thing as I do playing the game, and being able to break this relic from my childhood out was an incredible feeling. It's a tad ironic maybe using a guide for a procedurally generated random roguelike dungeon crawler, but it does come in handy if only to be able to quickly reference item descriptions or for the full Generation 3 Pokedex in the back. Oh yeah, and I picked Chikorita as my partner. You can choose any Pokemon you want really from the starting pool. It's a shame there's no Switch Online DS, so this has to be the Game Boy Advance version, because while they are 99% the exact same game, GBA only had 2 face buttons, meaning that B has to pull some double duty. It's how you sprint and open up the menu here, whereas the DS used X for the menu instead. It also used Y to bring up the grid, so you can reposition your Pokemon, which has been moved to select. A mild inconvenience, but I played the first hour or so thinking that this feature wasn't even in the GBA version, and if I had never played it on DS, probably would have went much longer without realizing it was here. Oh, I see, yes, oh, very interesting, yeah, So, everybody in the world of this game is a Pokemon, correct? That's a little strange, and in fact, it doesn't really make any sense if you think about it for a second, because they talk about humans. Humans exist, or at least they know what humans are, but how could they if they aren't real? And it's not like they're spoken about as if they're some sort of unicorn-esque mystical creature. Humans are portrayed as real, yet there are none. Why is that? Also, if all of the characters are Pokemon, right, with thoughts, feelings, opinions, with their own consciousness, then what's the deal with the Pokemon you're always fighting in these dungeons? Are these other Pokemon not sentient? Do they not have thoughts? Do they not have feelings? Do they not have opinions? They're just wild, feral animals, but it's strange. It's like you're beating up on your fellow man just for no reason. There's a clear Poke underclass in this game made up of these uncivilized, uncultured Pokemon that you come across in these dungeons. It's very strange. And what makes them suddenly so sociable as soon as they're recruited out of the dungeon? They just come to their senses and then they can join your team and act like a regular functioning member of society all of a sudden? I don't buy it. It's weird. And why does Chikorita have a house at the start, which she allows me to live inside of the entire game, while she sleeps out in this open grassy field? Also, how are the dungeons completely different every time you go there? Don't these Pokemon live here? The caves, mountains, and other areas completely terraform every single day with these Pokemon trapped inside? Do they go home for the day too? Is this just their fucking job? To patrol the insides of these mystery dungeons? And if so, who's paying them? Hell, I'd be pissed off and attacking everyone too if my home changed every single day. Rescuing Pokemon from other Pokemon doesn't make much sense either. Really? I have to save this fully evolved Fearow from Tiny Woods, the first area in the game which is made up only of Rattatas, Wurmples, and Pidgeys? You're being held hostage by unevolved Pidgeys? And how does my presence alone help them leave? Most of the missions in this game, you just have to walk up to them and they teleport out. It's not as if I can just teleport out whenever I want. You need a special orb for that, and they're not easy to find either. Shouldn't I have to escort these hostages out? Sometimes they want you to deliver an item, which I guess makes a little more sense, like you give them an item to help them escape. How is giving this Houndoom the TM for Giga Drain supposed to help them out of the dungeon? So the world makes absolutely no sense at all. None whatsoever. But these are nitpicks, and underneath them, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon is still an excellent game, I would say. It's much more brutal than any of the mainline Pokemon series because you're always at the mercy of so many random elements. Sometimes you find stairs instantly multiple floors in a row. Other times it's a minute-long process checking out about a dozen rooms, dealing with monster houses, which are when sometimes a space will just randomly completely fill up with enemy Pokemon. These are rare, but when they happen, they're basically a run-ender. At least before you're more powerful than God, that is. And if you die, it is an enormous setback here. Nothing like in regular Pokemon where defeated trainers stay defeated and you're never really in danger of losing progress. You don't even lose very much money in the regular series, just pocket change. The only real penalty for losing is the slight inconvenience of having to walk back to wherever you were. A 2-minute setback at most. But here in Mystery Dungeon, screw you. Do the entire thing over again. And some of these dungeons are 99 floors. Jesus. Dying means you randomly lose half of your items too, which can really fuck you over if you need a specific item to enter a certain place. Thankfully, this doesn't happen until the post-game, but it still does happen. As well as all your money, but money doesn't really matter very much here because the shop's inventory is much like most of the game, random and 99% of the time, made up of things you find lying on the ground anyway. The longer dungeons also contain stores in the areas themselves, which is just yet another random element. It's not as if you can rely on these. Of course, I have to mention that you can try to steal items too, and just like in Link's Awakening, the shopkeeper murders you for doing it. That's fun. That's sort of a legendary meme from this game. Things can go wrong so fast in Mystery Dungeon. Simple status effects such as poison can just end your time. Not so much because of the damage it deals, but because ordinarily you passively heal by just wasting turns. And poison pauses that. Moves that hit more than once are ridiculous broken cheese. You can just get Fury swiped to death at any time. Any fixed damage moves such as Sonic Boom will ruin your day. Oh boy, fuck this guy, ugh. Well, what else does this thing have? Oh, Fire Emblem. Yeah, let's play some Fire Emblem. Just Fire Emblem, no subtitle or nothing. I've reviewed a couple older Fire Emblem games in the past, the ones for the Super Nintendo, but this one right here on the Game Boy Advance, just called Fire Emblem here in America, was the first one I ever played as a kid, and it was also the first one that ever made it out of Japan, hence the confusing name. It's actually the 7th game in the series, so fans usually just call it Fire Emblem 7, which, fair enough I guess. In Japan it was called the Blazing Blade, not to be confused with the Binding Blade, which was actually the middle entry of a trilogy. We only got the 2nd and 3rd games, not the 1st, so thank you Nintendo. They put Fire Emblem characters in Smash Bros. Melee, so everyone outside of Japan collectively asked, what the hell is Fire Emblem? Well, this the hell is Fire Emblem. Neither of the Smash Bros. Characters are in this, so it doesn't really answer our question of where they came from, but hey, this little strategy game is actually pretty cool. And it was cool. Now, I had already played Shining Force when I played Fire Emblem for the first time, so it didn't exactly blow my little kid brain into pieces, but it did leave an impression on me, and I did think it was really cool. I thought it was way too hard, but I also thought it was cool. Playing through it here, it was actually much easier than I remembered. Kids are stupid, and I know the first time I played, I made every classic Fire Emblem blunder. I used Marcus, the already promoted paladin, to kill almost every single enemy. I never used Lyn or Eliwood or Hector, because if they die, you lose the mission instantly. A compounding problem, because ordinarily there's only one king on a chessboard, but in this game there's 3. You lose any of them, you lose the mission, which sucks. And it also gets them stuck in the cycle of suck when you're a kid, because you think that they're so important that you can't use them, right? But if you're not using them, then they're not gaining EXP, and if they're not gaining EXP, then they're not getting stronger. And as the enemies get stronger as the game goes on, these 3 characters become more and more squishy. They become more and more useless. They get to the point where they're dying in one hit, and you're just losing missions left and right, because they just get killed so easily. I didn't know about using items to promote units, I didn't pay attention to the weapon triangle, I didn't care about spreading out my experience points, I allowed characters to die without restarting the chapter, I wasted my good weapons on trash enemies, I never talked to NPCs or tried to recruit new party members, I allowed enemy thieves to steal all the treasure chests. Now that I think about it and list all of them out loud, there are a lot of ways a Fire Emblem playthrough can go wrong, especially with the old games. Even just making one of these blunders can lead to a bad time, but doing all of them? You have no chance, because the old Fire Emblem games, if you play them wrong, you're not getting to the end. You can't finish the game doing everything wrong. You gotta play the game right, or else you don't make it. You just can't do it. Eventually your army becomes so weak that you literally cannot finish these chapters in any kind of reasonable way. But now, going back to this game as a Fire Emblem veteran, it's almost a little too simple, a little too easy for my tastes. That's sort of the duality on how this Fire Emblem is seen. If it's supposed to be the first ever Fire Emblem game, then yeah, what a fresh concept. A tactical RPG with no generic units, every face is a character, and death matters because they don't come back. It's turn-based, grid-based, you move all your units, then your enemy moves all theirs. It's easy to understand compared to, I don't know, something like StarCraft or Tactics Ogre or a Koei title. But underneath the hood, it's as complex as any of those. This is a good game because the fundamentals of Fire Emblem are rock solid. This is just another iteration of those fundamentals, which, to be fair, the last 2 Super Nintendo games took some weird out there risks. I know less than nothing about the other GBA one we never got, but a return to basic Emblem may have been necessary, especially if this was going to act as the introduction to the series for most of the world. There are 30 main chapters, not counting side stories, and 10 of those are a dedicated tutorial. As someone who has played many Fire Emblem games, they were excruciating to sit through, but if you are a stupid kid, and all kids are stupid, so you were, they give you the illusion that you're actually getting somewhere. I probably got to around chapter 20, if I had to guess, before my army became too pathetic to do anything. But these tutorial missions gave me the feeling that I was doing something. Had the first game been Genealogy of the Holy War, I probably would have been stuck in Chapter 2, and there's nothing more demoralizing than that. At least in this game, I can say I made it more than halfway. Even if you haven't played this game, if you've played any Fire Emblem before Awakening, you pretty much have without even knowing it. None of the map designs made me spit up my Cheerios, nothing in this game made me go, oh, you know, I've never seen that before. Actually, you know what, that's not entirely true. There were two contextualization options that I did find interesting about this one. Plays this guy named Mark, and he is an off-screen tactician in charge of commanding all these units. It's not abnormal for a Fire Emblem game to feature a main protagonist character who is supposed to represent the player, but this has to be the only one where they're not controllable or even a visible unit during battle. You have a sprite, we see flashes of him in cutscenes, but never in battle. You're literally just the ideas guy. And secondly, your stored inventory is represented by a guy in a blue tent, which you can choose to deploy or not at the start of a fight. And if he's not out there, you don't have access to any kind of inventory storage. In Fire Emblem, every unit carries their own items. You can trade between different characters, but inventory management has always been a lot clunky. Hell, in Genealogy, you can't even trade items between units. You have to sell them to the store, then rebuy them with the character you want to have the item. Fire Emblem on the Game Boy Advance is a pretty good game. I just don't know who it's for in present year. If you are a newcomer to Fire Emblem, then you're better off playing pretty much any of the modern games, if we're being honest. And if you've played a lot of Fire Emblem, then this one doesn't really do anything that makes it stand out. It's sort of just the manifestation of the stereotypical Fire Emblem. If you've played some of the other older games, especially the Super Nintendo ones, I really don't think you're going to get a lot out of this. And the story, oh my god, oh. Man, that was putting me to sleep instantly. I was skipping cutscenes by Chapter 5, but you know what game actually has a story worth caring about? That's right, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Yeah, the world might not make any sense, but it's not about what you have, it's about how you use it. And this game has to have one of the greatest stories ever told in the Pokemon universe. I don't remember any episodes of the show which are this well set up or heartfelt. The mainline games certainly never came anywhere close. And it begins with good casting, you know, like in a movie, which is odd to think about, but when you're making characters in a Pokemon game where everyone needs to be a pre-existing design, like they're not inventing new Pokemon for this game is what I'm trying to say. It's important to pick the proper Mons to play the correct roles in your story, and they fucking killed it here. All of the protagonist and partner selections are first form, early game, lower level, childlike Pokemon, which fits in with your wide-eyed optimist best friend, or you're along for the ride, freshly human turned Pokemon ignorance. You can't really pick a bad twosome out of this pool narratively. Caterpie is the small child who idolizes you, Gardevoir is a mythical being that visits you in your dreams, Ninetales is the subject of legends, Snubbull, Bellsprout, and Lombre are the town gossips, Kangaskhan runs the storage because of her massive pouch, Kecleon runs the store, which might not be an obvious pick, but after seeing him here in this role, I can't imagine it being filled out by any other Pokemon better. Persian runs the bank naturally, Pelipper runs the post office. The antagonist is a Gengar who calls his group Team Meanies. Alakazam leading a trio of himself, Charizard and Tyranitar, representing the most ass-kicking team in the game, was spot on. That is such an endgame team from the mainline series. And Xatu being the slow but wise prophet also makes sense. And there are many, many, many smaller roles throughout the game which are cast similarly well. I really think they got it out of the park in this game with the characterization. Like, if a Charizard was a Pokemon in a universe where everybody is a Pokemon, I think he would act like the Charizard in this game. Same goes for Alakazam, same goes for Gengar. I really think they nailed the characterization of these people. I don't think I want to spoil the whole thing, but I'll at least give you the premise. There's an old legend about a human who once deserted their pet Gardevoir after grabbing one of Ninetales' tails, that was cursed to one day become a Pokemon themselves, and when that day comes to pass, it would mean the end of the Poke world, Pokegeddon. You have no memory as your time as a human, and you do often see visions of Gardevoir in your dreams, so naturally it seems like you're the human causing the end times. This is fantastic tension, and they set it up well too, only allowing you to know one part of the legend at a time. So over the course of the plot, you start to doubt yourself a little more and more. The first half of the story is about making friends and helping out all of these characters, earning a positive rapport amongst the townspeople, but then when your secret gets out, everyone turns against you. It doesn't matter what you did in the past. It doesn't matter what your temperament was. You're the guy in the legend, and they run you out of your fucking home. Then you spend life on the road running away from an angry mob. And it's not just the idiots too, even Alakazam turns against you. It is all incredibly well done, but it is still firmly a baby game for babies. The entire thing is at about a second grade reading level, but it makes for one hell of a children's story. It's rare you get anything interesting done with Pokemon narratively. In this instance, they had a unique concept in that you are the Pokemon this time, and holy Ninetales did they capitalize. The sad moments are actually sad. The dramatic moments are actually dramatic. The suspenseful moments are actually suspenseful, who'd have thought? Might sound simple, but grading on the Pokemon curve, it's a goddamned miracle, because whenever these games try to tell a story, I get a chronic case of the who the fuck cares. Sort of like what happened to me in the other game I reviewed in this video. It's a goddamned miracle, and that's the highest compliment I can give Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. I actually cared about the story. I cared about it back then. I care about it now. And when it's over, it's not even really over because it has one of the longest post games in all of games, and it even continues on. It picks up the threads on where the legend left off. The sequel might be slightly better, but I really can't say because I haven't played it since it came out. You know, life's been kicking my ass lately, so it was nice to be able to sit down and play through two childhood games of mine for this.